Hey Jen, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Ebony?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for joining us on Boss Wife Live tonight. I'm super excited about this conversation. So give us a little bit background about what it is that you do. Well, first, before you do that, what is your morning process?
I love the morning process. I'm big about journaling and I'm really big on gratitude. So, three gratitudes. And it doesn't matter if you do it in the morning or the evening. I'm just more of a morning person.
Mhm.
I like to do something from the Bible scripturally. We have a book that we read like it's a pre-done thing for the day. So we do that and then gratitude journal. So how I do the gratitude journal is three new things every day that you are thankful for. And what I love about this is that I did it without knowing the science, and then I learned the science later and I super geek out on the science. And the science is that within 21 days you're training your brain to look for the positive in the world. And I have a way that I do this with the kids too. Again, it was totally an inadvertent thing, but there's a lot to be said about the number three in science and doing things. So, three new gratitudes. I love to stretch. I love to exercise in the morning. I love to have my coffee. I get up early so that I'm alone for a couple hours, and that time and space for me is really important.
So what time do you get the kids up?
8 o'clock.
Okay. Okay. So
So,
you get up pretty early.
I get up at 5:30 and they get up at 8. We're down to one child at home.
Okay.
So, and I homeschool her and she's 6th grade. And so my rule is up at 8 to start school.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was wondering if all 18 were still in the house, but I was just
No.
wondering how that went.
Well, I mean, it's going to sound super crazy. However, um, we've never had more than 12 at home at one time out of 18. So yeah, by the way, I have 18 children. And we've had 9 to 12 for years and years and years. That many kids. There've been a lot of years where we've had 9 to 12. And yeah, now we're down to one. Almost all my kids are adults. And so there you go.
I have four, and they
Yep.
are 13, 14, 15, and 16. So there's stair steps. And yeah, like I don't know how you're like even living at this moment.
I mean, just like with the morning routine and with the gratitude, I chose my life and I love it. And
Right.
when there have been times that I haven't loved it, I have the ability to choose differently.
Yeah.
And that's not always easy. I mean, in my past, that's meant divorce, which is not something that I got married to. I didn't sign up for divorce, when I signed up to get married, but sometimes it's really, really tough decisions in my own personal life. Sometimes it's quitting a job that gives you a lot of safety and security. Um, you don't have to stay in a life that you don't love. You might have to come up with an exit strategy to make the changes, but I've never wanted to live a life that I don't love. And so I chose it and I love it and I can choose differently if I want it to look different. And that's been huge in my kind of process through life.
Right. So let's give my readers a little bit, my readers, my listeners, and my audience, a little bit more about your background. I know I could just kind of jump in, but I like for
It's
all
good.
different things to kind of be, like a girlfriend just talking at the end of the night, getting that last phone call in. So that's kind of how I like things to flow. But if you don't mind, let us know who you are. Let us know what you're passionate about.
Oh, so many things. So obviously kids.
Right.
A passion,
Obviously.
passion. I wasn't sure if I could have my own kids biologically, and I went through infertility and I did have my first one. And that whole experience taught me that it really doesn't have to fit in the box. And I had known from an early age that I would consider doing foster care. And part of that was that I grew up very similarly to foster kids with a lot of the same situations. And I wrote a book about my life growing up in that. And a lot of that was because I had a third grade teacher that made such a pivotal difference in my life that it completely changed my trajectory. So I learned in third grade, and I didn't think about it like this in third grade, but the lesson that I learned, that I was taught, is that you can make a huge difference in the life of another human being in passing by just being yourself, and often without ever realizing that you made that difference. I did go back almost 22 years ago. This summer will be 22 years. I found my third grade teacher still in Rhode Island, still teaching at the same school. And I spent a weekend with her, and I had the chance to thank her. She was such an example, and I wrote and spoke about her often. And the only person that really needed to know, that should know, was the only person who didn't. And so I'm really grateful that I went through that process to find her and to thank her personally. And because of that, because of how I grew up, because I wasn't perpetuating the cycle, because I had this woman that was this amazing example among other positive people in my life, I wanted to do foster care. For me, the children that I gave birth to were the extras. And often people will say, "Oh, you did foster care, you took in extras." No, I chose those. And one of my daughters, who's adopted, we joke about it. We're very open about it. We laugh about this stuff a lot. And one of my adopted daughters looked at one of my biological daughters and said, "Mom chose me. She didn't know what she was getting with you."
Hilarious.
So I'm very passionate about that. I'm very passionate about foster care, about really being a very present and focused mom, doing the best job that you can. And there's a lot to unpack with that. I am a runner. I'm a minimalist. As a matter of fact, this weekend we are moving into our RV full time. We've spent the last year renovating it. So we're minimalists, really up for an adventure, love being outside, absolutely healthy lifestyle. I wanted to I looked at my parents, and I didn't want to age the way they were aging. And I was born in 1970. So I had very unhealthy examples back in the 70s. And I really wanted to age gracefully and stay fit and happy and healthy, because those were things that I was not exposed to. I thought about, raising my kids and being really present and there for them. And then grandkids, and I've got 12 grandkids now. So I can tell you it works if you stick to it. So I'm really passionate about living healthy, spending time outside, running, not allowing your stuff to own you, because that's a lot of stress. I am like super, absolutely over the moon crazy about my husband. And I don't think people talk about that enough. It's real easy to talk about, like, he ticks me off. Don't get me wrong. Like there's
Right.
there's no utopia here, but like I am so ridiculously in love with this man,
Oh,
absolutely crazy about him. He is my best friend, my biggest cheerleader and supporter. So I'm really passionate about my marriage and having healthy relationships and supporting the moms that are really struggling, because holy cow, it's hard, and there's no manual, and there shouldn't be. And we're all winging it. And it's the most important, challenging thing that we could possibly ever do. And I think if there's a daily quota of mistakes, I am not a quitter. So I've met or exceeded my daily quota of mistakes. And my kids will tell you about every single one of them. But I really, really have loved it. And I think just knowing, in tough situations, this too shall pass. And there's always a silver lining, and figuring out what it is, that every experience, including the negative ones, including the tough stuff, we are there to learn and to teach. And so lean into that. What are you learning, and what would you like to turn around and teach in that moment? And that, you can change, nothing defines you except you. I mean, you can allow it, but nothing has to define who you are. It's just part of who you are. And yeah, I mean, choose your life and love it. So I'm super
amazing.
passionate. Like there's a lot I'm passionate about.
I love it. I love it all. Like I'm a very passionate person too, so I totally get it. And that's one of the things that draw me to you. First of all, it was definitely the 18 kids, and I was like, yeah, I got to get her on here so I can hear the story. Like that's amazing. I do. I also come from a very blended family. We have some family members of my family that are adopted, and I mean, the funny thing is, I love I love the way God does things. Like we all look alike. Like everything is similar. Like everything is, you wouldn't be able to tell unless we told you, right? Like I think even my kids resemble like my uncle. Like, and I'm like, he's not even like biologically, you know, in the family, but my grandmother adopted him at birth. Like literally, I think he was like maybe 3 days old. And so, and we are like only 4 years apart. And so we were raised kind of like brother and sister. And so, I mean, he was like my best friend growing up, but like I promise you, my kids act just like him. And I'm like, that is crazy, you know,
It's
but that's how God works though, right?
It
Like,
is. It is.
that's
If I
how
lined up
it is.
18 kids and I was like, I've had four biologically, which ones are biological? You would totally mess it up.
Right.
I can guarantee you would get it wrong because some of the biological, three of my biological kids look more like adopted kids, and some of my adopted kids are blonde hair and blue eyed. Like I gave birth
Right.
to dark hair, brown eyed kids, no blue eyes. I've never given birth to blue eyes, but you might get one out of four biological correct. And there's a lot to be said about nature and nurture, and I think that that's a fascinating conversation. And also that we resemble, I think, the people, like you're the most like the five people you spend the most time with, that whole theory. And sometimes it's like people look like their dogs. It's that theory. So like I'm going to give you a couple that are totally not related. Okay, so people look like their
Okay.
dogs, and you are the most like people, that the five people you surround yourself with. And then you have similar mannerisms and stuff that you get from the people that are parenting you, whether that's grandparents or extended family members or close friends or teachers. That, like, it doesn't matter. We gravitate towards and resemble the people that we spend time with, and we emulate who we like. Mimicry is the greatest form of flattery. So I think there's all of these things to that when you put it all together, and then you see my family, and you see this picture with, like, we've got a picture of 14 of the kids. That's the most kids I've ever gotten together at the same time. And you would like totally lose. You would totally lose picking them out.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We um we don't have like a really big family, 6 of us in my household, but like we don't have like a really big family, but it's big enough, right? And so I love it. Like, Christmas time, Thanksgiving, it's me, it's my mom. My mom only had me and my brother, and then my aunt, she adopted 2 little girls 2 years ago, actually. And they're just, they fit right in. And so and then it's my auntie, her girls, and then my uncle and his 2 boys. And like that's it. But it's like when you get everybody in the same household, it's like, you
Oh,
know, it's just, yeah, like I love it. I really do. I love it.
so good.
So I couldn't even imagine like living with that many kids. And it's funny because my mom, like I said, she only had me and my brother, but we're 16 years apart. So so when
Wow.
I say, right, so when I say, oh, my, like, the kids have friends over or whatever, and she's like, how, like, why do you have all them kids in your house? Blah, blah. And I'm like, listen, after you get past 2 kids, you don't even notice that you got 10 kids in your house. Like,
So
it's all the same noise, it's all the same traffic,
that's the
it's all the same
craziest
food.
thing. People will be like, I just want to come into your house, and like when we had 12 kids at home, I just want to see what it's like. And I would like, all right, come on over, have dinner with
Right.
us. And the single biggest thing that every single person said was it wasn't as noisy as they thought. Like if one
Mm-mm,
child is this noisy, 10 is like 100. It's not like that because they pair
mm-mm,
up
it's not.
and they play with each other, and they
Yep.
are not demanding of your attention as much. I mean,
Yeah.
we're down to one at home now because there's an 8-year gap, and this is the hardest thing I've ever done. I'll take 10 kids
Imagine.
over. Oh my gosh, I'll take 10 over because she has no
Right.
one else. Like it's
Yep.
us. We are her total source of everything. And man, it's a lot of pressure all the
It is.
time. So, and she even asked us a couple of years ago, like, why can't you guys just adopt one or two kids my
More.
age? And I was like, dude, like I am totally kind of on board for that crazy
Right.
journey. Just because it is easier. It is easier. Yeah.
Right. That's so true though. Like that is
Oh,
so true. You're right. We're on spring break this week. And so my older two, they're like in this UTC, which is one of the colleges here. They're like on campus for like most of the week. So my baby two had nothing to do because me and my husband are still working. So I'm like, yeah, y'all gotta go somewhere. Like you can't just be at home like, hey, what we doing? Like, no, No. So my baby girl's at like my aunt's house, and then my baby boy, he's over his friend's house. And I'm like, yeah, you gotta keep two together. Like somebody has to have somebody. That's so true.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
It is so
But
true.
so tell us what does your day-to-day look like for your business? Let's talk about that. Let's get into that.
The business has evolved over time. 6 years ago, I wrote the book, and then 9 months later, I started the podcast. uh 11 years ago, has it been, in 2011, so in October 2011, so over 10 years, 10 and a half years now, I started my blog. So the blog happened, and it was just sort of a cathartic way for me to share my story, and I worked full time. When I started writing the book, once that was done, I have been at home ever since. And it really depends on it. Businesses are like facets, and they change. I am an NLP practitioner. I am certified in that specific type of therapy. And I like to utilize it in coaching, preferably group coaching. Although within group coaching, I like to do one-on-one time together, because I really, really love to work on quickly getting through past traumas. We can show up as the best version of ourselves only if those things aren't holding us back. And because I did it, I wanted to learn how I could do that for other people. So that's one part of what I do. And sometimes I'm open for coaching, and sometimes I'm open for one-on-one, and sometimes, like right now, I have it shut down. I just stopped doing it for a while. I think we all need breaks, and there are different seasons of our lives. Um, I just became a notary to do mobile notary because since the pandemic, we decided to homeschool our daughter who's in 6th grade. So that consumes a lot of my time, and that was part of shutting down the coaching. You can only be split in so many directions. So I had some decisions to make in this last couple of years. One, I absolutely want to keep the blog. It's about parenting, which is the single biggest thing that I want to write and talk about, healthy relationships and time management. And I homeschool, and I wanted to be able to do something where I made money still and worked without coaching. So I have, for 6 years, done VA freelancing on the side that I've never advertised, that people don't even know that I do, because I like taking a few hours, 5 or 10 hours a week, to spend on someone else's business, doing some of their heavy lifting, because I'm good at it. And it's interesting. So my business right now, I just stopped doing the coaching. I'm doing the blog and the podcast, and I'm doing, mobile notary, and I do VA stuff on the side. And I think the biggest reason that I am successful at having my own business is because it's fluid and not static. And I'm really okay leaning into that. I don't feel disappointed or like it was a failure if I have shifted gears or gone back to something, or I stopped doing the coaching and I sit back a little bit and I do other things to support people. So my business right now looks like being a VA for a company in Australia, and other companies here, being a mobile notary for people who need that, setting the hours exactly like I want them, and no more, no less, and then deciding when I want to do coaching and take that on again. And it really is my passion to work with moms. It 100% is. Moms are my favorite because I'm one, and I've been at my bottom, and I want to make it faster, easier, and more supported if you're at your bottom. So I really do love the coaching the most. I just feel like you have to also honor yourself in your own business. And sometimes that means taking a break. And it's interesting what we label as success and what we label as failure that maybe shouldn't be labeled as either. So I do a lot of stuff behind the scenes on my laptop while I'm homeschooling, because right now it's easier for me to not be on the phone, to not be on live calls, to schedule things around what's the most important. And what's the most important shifts. It just
Right.
shifts. So
Yeah,
that's what it looks like for me.
I love that. What do you think? What was the biggest adversity in building your business?
Oh my gosh, for me, it would be marketing. I mean, I know I got hung up on branding, and branding's just like, how would you decorate your bedroom if you were a girl with your own bedroom? Like decorate a bedroom in your mind, like your high school
Right,
bedroom, right? And like
right.
vomit that onto your website. I mean, branding is really an area I think people get super, super caught up in. And well, what
Mhm.
words and how do I use them? It's the way you talk. Your branding is
Right.
just the way you talk, and you you want to make it outward facing. I don't want to talk as much about me like I'm on the podcast. I want to talk as much as I can about what this will do for you, but I want it to be in my own language, just the way like you and I kicking back, having coffee in a conversation. And so it's interesting we get stuck on certain things, but the biggest thing was marketing and getting word out there. That's a single biggest thing. If a tree falls in the forest, does it still make a sound? You could be the best insert thing here, and if nobody knows about you, it doesn't matter. And so I've often felt like building that is like running for prom queen, but you don't really want to be prom queen. And that has probably been the single most difficult part of running a business. You can't help people with a book or help people with coaching or make a difference in this way if nobody knows what you're doing and who you are. So you have to gain exposure, and that's a really hard place to navigate. That's been the single biggest for me.
It is. It is. So, how would you encourage the women out here that are dealing with infertility and trying
Mm.
to live up to this standard of society about having kids, not having kids? What age you should have kids. Like, what is your advice for those women?
Ah, First of all, I went through infertility at 20 because I was married at 19. And for whatever reason, stupidly, we thought that sounded like a fabulous idea. And I had my first daughter at 21. And as someone 51 years old, looking back at people, looking at my kids that age, I would do everything I could to discourage them from getting married super young and having kids. For me, it was awesome. And my oldest biological daughter just turned 30, and I can't believe that much time has passed. I don't understand. Like, I'm still 30. It doesn't even make sense to me. I think there is no right age or right time or right thing or right any of it. Nothing is right. There's no right and wrong. It has to be what it is for you. I have no regrets about being a mom at 21 years old and going through infertility at 20 and having this massive family. I- I- zero regrets. I mean, I think by the time I was 35, I had 14 kids.
Oh, wow.
And then I was divorced, and my 30-year-old daughter actually fixed us up, but I met and married a man with 4 children whose wife had died. You don't think about that. I didn't graduate high school at 17 like, yeah, 18 kids sounds like a nice round number, and I think I want to
Right.
be in her. Like, I never thought about any of that.
Right.
I think what we do is we do what we're faced with. And so I can't tell someone that it's not a good time or that you're too old to do it or too young to do it, because I'd be a total hypocrite. I think you do it when it's right for you. Infertility, it's the toughest thing, one of the toughest things that you're ever going to do. One of the toughest things. And right now I have a school picked out, and I am applying for scholarships to go back to school to be a midwife, which is a big part of why I stopped coaching, because I want to go back to that dream I had 17 years ago when I was studying to be a midwife. Are you going to tell me that at 51 I'm too old to do that?
No.
Or right, all right, like of course not. Or that you know $20,000 in applying for grants and scholarships to make that possible is ridiculous for me to like, no, of course not. Of course we're not going to do that. So how could I ever tell somebody that their journey into infertility and parenting is the wrong time? I think if you want to have kids and you're struggling and you're struggling, that is part of it. And because it's part of it, you have to realize that that means that there's a chance that it won't work out the way you want, which is to have a child. I was pregnant 7 times and gave birth 4 times, which means I lost 3. And I had 10 surgeries for those kids. My 7th pregnancy, I lost twins at 19 weeks. And I had a D&C, which failed. And I just kept hemorrhaging. And I had a hysterectomy vaginally, which failed because I had internal bleeding. And then I had a surgery that took over 2.5 hours. They called in a second surgeon. They cut me hip to hip and took everything out. They suctioned everything out of my abdomen, put it through this machine, and I had 5 blood transfusions. 3 of them were from the blood that was suctioned out of my abdomen. I was dead on the table. Was it not worth it? For like, no, of course not. And will your story end up the same? No, I mean, like, part of me really hopes not. I went through infertility right up to IVF, and I was like, if I need IVF, then I'm just going to adopt. You have to set boundaries and parameters with yourself emotionally and physically, and I did. I did do that. And you have to decide what your journey is going to look like if it's not the most ideal. And remember that we don't have control over everything, but you can still choose your life and be happy. I mean, I didn't think I'd have kids. I had that first pregnancy. It was really tough. I didn't want to jump back into IVF because that's exactly where they would have picked up where they left off. If I had wanted to have a second baby, in the medical professional's opinion, IVF was the only way that that would be possible because I got pregnant on maxed out on medication the first time. And I wasn't willing to do that. I could have never gotten pregnant again after that, and that would have been okay with me. So, just like we were talking about earlier, with infertility, if there's a question and you want a child, you have to do it. You have to set boundaries to know when physically and emotionally you're tapping out. I did not do IVF. I was tapping out. And you have to understand that there's a husband as part of this, there's a partner as part of this that also may be emotionally and physically tapping out. Because it's really hard. And you have to realize that your family doesn't necessarily look like this pretty princess fairy tale book that we think that it does. And so I would say to think out of the box, even within infertility. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. It definitely does. I think, we get surrounded by, we allow ourselves to get surrounded by what society tells us we have to do, and then we get drowned in it. And then that's what we accept, and women, we take on things all the time from other people all the time, and it's not always our story. It's not always our experience. We just adopt other people's ideas and emotions, and we feel like, yeah, this is what I have to do. And so I love that about you. I love how you took your own story and you did what you wanted to do, and you didn't care about, what other people think. Because
No.
I think when I look back and I hear the stories that my grandmother used to tell me about, it was 13 of them. Yeah, no. So the fact that you were like, this is who I am, this is who I know I want to be, and this is who I've always been. I love that about you. And I love the fact that, you also put your business on hold. Like, I didn't even know that. Like, you put your life coaching business and everything on hold to go back to do something that you wanted to do in the very beginning in the first place. And I love the fact that you're so surrounded with life, and then you're going to continue to bring life and nurture life into this world. Like, that's amazing. I like the fact that you're going back to be a midwife. I have a friend who does that now, and it's like one of the glorious things that she's ever done, and I think it's amazing. I don't want to do it. That's not for me. Like, I'm in the medical field, like I'm a medical assistant, but helping somebody to deliver babies, especially at home, is like, that I think that's definitely part of our ancestors. And I think that's a very great way to connect to how we were all brought into this world in the beginning, and I think that's amazing. I think that's amazing. I love that. I love that about you. Is there anything that you want to share about your book? So the name of your book is Hello There, right?
Hello, my name is Warrior Princess.
Yes, yes.
The book is my story growing up in dysfunction. I mean, really, it's done in a way that's self-help. At the end of every chapter, I take in retrospect. This was 6 years ago. I was in my 40s. So, as a 6-year-old or as a 9-year-old or as a 13-year-old, you don't go through a traumatic event, especially, or a negative situation and think, well, what positive things did I learn from that? You are building skill sets, though. You're building tenacity and survival, and there are always silver linings. And so at the end of every chapter, I looked at what now, as my 40-something-year-old self, what did I learn? What was I building at that moment? And I wanted to teach people in that, not just what I was building, but that they can look at every situation in their lives and do the same. It's a timeline of my life. That's all it is. And you don't have to do it in book form. But there were 2 activities I did within the book, and that was one of them. What skills are you building? And what I would encourage people to do is that if you write out your life like a timeline, And you think about all of the things, it's like my parents divorced at 6, my mom remarried at 9, they divorced at 13, I moved to Vermont. Whatever it is, like we chunk our lives in time based on generally events, people and events. And if you write out that timeline of your life and you think about every single thing that happened in your life that wasn't positive, that has some sort of negative impact or some sort of trauma. I mean, I was molested growing up. I lost my virginity to date rape. I was on the street. I stabbed a guy in the leg. There's all like, it was not a fun upbringing. My father was a raging violent alcoholic. I watched him break my stepmother's nose. It was not a good time growing up. So when I write about those things, though, I'm learning something. I'm learning something positive. And I really feel strongly that everything we go through is a teaching and a learning and a teaching moment, right? When you go through something and you're like, holy cow, we got through that. It could be shopping with your 4 kids at the grocery store and having it make you crazy, Okay, wait, what did I learn? And what could I teach somebody about shopping with their 4 kids? Because I know that you can relate to that, right? We can take every situation and think, what did I learn and what could I teach? And with things that are bigger and more traumatic, the lessons tend to be bigger. So I did that at the end of each chapter. And that's the way that it's self-help. I mean, it's a memoir, it's about my life, but it's self-help in the sense that I want you to see that you can do this in your own life. The other thing that I did in the book, and that is something I taught in a workshop, and this is also something I taught in a separate workshop. When I went through the timeline, I couldn't write about people without asking their permission. So if it was somebody who was negative, I changed their name. If it was somebody who was positive, I wanted their permission. So I reached out to 23 different people that had a positive influence in my life by the time I was 21 years old. That's pretty significant. And I reached out to every single one of them and I said, can I write about you? And every one of them said yes. And then I would send them their section or their chapter and say, this is what I wrote about. And it initiates the most outstanding conversations. Not like I needed their permission. I just wanted their awareness. But if you and I met each other in a couple months and I was like, oh, remember last time we talked when you said that? And you're like, oh yeah, when I said this, I was like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about, right? Like, you remember from each other's memories. And it's not that it wasn't my memory. It's that having those conversations triggered my memory to expand more. And I had the ability to thank every one of those people in my life. So the book, I will send it to anyone as a PDF who wants it. I always give it away for free. So that's one thing. And, reading it, what it should do is encourage you to map out your own life in a way that takes those negative times and maps them out with gratitude and silver lining and learning and skill sets. And in my skill set workshop, at the end, you create a skill set resume, which is super interesting because I did this with myself just because I was doing it and it was part of my process. But then when I had to actually do a resume for my job, I looked at my skill sets and I'm like all of that in one way or another should be plugged into, from this date to this date, I worked at this place for this much of an hour. And this is what I did. Like, do it based on your skill sets. And you're going to look at this resume and be like, I am the most incredible human being. I want to hire me, And so anyway, I know that was like a long explanation on the book, but I want the book to teach people a lot and I want it to encourage them to do a lot. And it's not just about my story. I needed to get my story out there. I felt like it was inside knocking, trying to get out. And I held back because I didn't want to hurt my mom's feelings. And it did hurt my mom's feelings. And we did not have a good relationship prior to that. And we certainly don't now. I also do not have a relationship with my sister any longer. And I didn't do it for that.
Right.
And it's interesting because neither one of them have read the whole book, but I did it because I wanted to make a difference to that one, which is why I did foster care, right? I didn't get 18 kids in a day. I want to make a difference to that one. And that was the same thing with the book. And sharing my story was a way to do that. 6 of my kids came forward 7 years ago and reported a family member being physically abusive. And I was in court and I was an advocate and I went pretty ham on that situation. And it was a year later that I wrote the book because My fear of what people would think was gone when I thought about, what if one of my kids was afraid to share their story, or they allowed it to define them? How would I feel then? And I'm telling you, when you switch things to your kids, they're like, that's it. You completely switch gears. Where I had all this fear and hesitation about writing this book and sharing my story, I wanted to be an example to them that it does not define who you are, and you can write about anything. And if it hurts relationships, those weren't good relationships that you needed in your life. And to never be afraid of their story, but to step in. So that's, the book is a lot to me. And I don't talk about it in that way ever. But that was really why I wrote the book and what it was. And from there, 9 months later, I launched a podcast because I felt like, okay, I wrote my story and that's cool, but it's one and there's billions of people out there. And so I want other people to share their stories, and this is going to be really awesome. And it has been. It's been 5 years of other people getting to share their stories. And what a privilege that, like, I chose you today to share my story, and I trusted you to hold space and allow this to go in whatever direction it did, and for me to be raw and vulnerable in whatever way. What a blessing and a gift that is to the person
Yes.
who's interviewing, right? And I mean, I can't say enough beautiful things about that.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, tell us where we can find some more of this great advice.
Momsrunningit.com is my website. It's the blog, the podcast is there, the book is there. You can sign up for a PDF there, or I can figure something out with you where people can just get it from you. And basically it has a way to connect with me, whatever's the best way for you. So if you want to do the contact form or the phone number or my email, or find me on social media. But just like you, I love it when people reach out and ask questions or critique things or tell me I have a spelling error, or, like, share their
Right.
story, or
Yeah.
I love it. So, like, don't be shy, reach out.
Definitely, definitely. Well, okay. Well, thank you so much, Jen, for coming on tonight. This has been amazing. It's definitely changed my life. So I know it's helped somebody else on my podcast as well in my community. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us on tonight. This is Boss Wife Live. You know where you can find us on, every platform that you listen to music on. We're there. This video will definitely be on YouTube. So, guys, look it up, like, share, subscribe, and comment, and definitely look up Jen. Like, she has so much more information to give you guys, so much more advice, so much more things, so much more knowledge and wisdom to impart to you guys. So thank you so much again, Jen, for coming on, guys. I love you, and I will talk to you next Tuesday.